Jeff, it's great to be with you again. So
Thanks,
delighted
Aviv.
to catch up. Let's go with what's live in the moment. And I know I've had some robust experiences recently, and you just came back from a Scotland trip. Where were you, and what are some of the learnings and discoveries from this recent expedition?
Yes. Well, I was at Findhorn in the Scottish Highlands, and some will know that Findhorn is a famous community that emerged in the 1960s and practiced love in action and really listening to nature and partnering with the intelligence of nature, and also listening deep within. So those are three of the essential principles and practices of the Findhorn community, and they grew outrageously large cabbages and other plants that aren't even supposed to grow in northern Scotland because of their love and their partnership with nature. So they've been a demonstration for almost 60 years, and they've grown into an eco-village. And it's really, the Findhorn Foundation is really a spiritual community, because these are in many cases spiritual principles that then get put into practice by the eco-village and people in the surrounding area. And over the years, it has evolved and evolved and evolved. And so probably now it's on about Findhorn 6.0. And the pandemic has catalyzed another major, actually, I would say, wholesale transformation. I don't want to speak about the internal workings. It's all still happening, and it's it's a delicate time for all of us, frankly. But I had the privilege of being there during a pivotal week when certain decisions were being made, and so I connected with the chair of trustees and the CFO and the CEO, and had many meetings with them, and brought in a kind of sacred outsider perspective, because I've spent time there in the past, including a month in late 2018, early 2019, and I even was invited to co-facilitate their internal conference in January 2019. So I have a heartfelt connection to the place, and more than a little bit of experience there. So I could see some patterns, and also bringing the intuition forward, I was able to help to attune, you could say, the field, and to listen to what is it that's emerging with Findhorn 6.0, and how can the people come into coherence and resonance with that impulse. So I used a concentric circles model to map, to plot where people are with respect to that central impulse now. So 0.0 in this concentric circle map would be the absolute center. And so I went through with the different departments and different ideas about what it might be that's trying to happen there, and intuitively put them on the map. And then I showed the map to the chair of trustees and others. And every conversation I had brought the people in closer to the center. As it became clearer and clearer what might be emerging, people had the opportunity to say within themselves, yes, that feels good, that resonates. And without exception, people said, wow, this really resonates, because it came from a place of deep listening. So it wasn't just Jeff's opinion, it was in some sense speaking for the land, speaking for the field. And that's what the founders of Findhorn did back in the 1960s. Eileen Caddy was, in a sense, the channel for the community, and Dorothy was the connection to nature. And anyway, it's quite an interesting story.
Well, and then with David Spengler in the time that he spent there.
Right, so he came shortly thereafter. It was in the late 60s, early 70s, I don't recall now, but he was also a channel for the community and a director of the community. And then, of course, Peter, the other co-founder, was the love and action guy. Like, he was a former military person, and he knew how to get things done. And he could manage, and he had some ability to kind of work with people to make projects happen. And they had wonderful manifestation ability as well. So even though they didn't have money, they were able to manifest not only big cabbages, but a community and buildings, a beautiful universal hall and meditation sanctuaries and so on. So speaking of which, while I was there, I had some very powerful meditations with the people I mentioned, and a vision came to me I was sort of taken into the air, looking down on what's called the park, which is kind of, well, there are two campuses, and this is the original campus, if you will. They also have a big former hotel in a nearby city, which is of a different nature. So I was taken above the park, looking down, and then I had the experience of zooming in on different features of the new Findhorn. And so I was shown, for instance, new construction with really big beams, so really symbolizing really solid construction and fresh paint. And there was this feeling of light and new energy. So a lot of these structures that are there now would be replaced. And some of the other details that are interesting and maybe generally interesting, not just because Findhorn is a case study, but for the larger world. So the foundation has been a large, if you will, charity. It's technically a Scottish charity with many, many, many people. And so it's structured in a somewhat monolithic way. What I see for the future is that there will be about a dozen small for-profit enterprises that actually fulfill the operations of the foundation when it comes to guest services and the dining hall and other essential functions in the park and beyond. And that these small enterprises will be entrepreneurial and innovative and find more ways to use the resources. So you have a lot of idle capacity. I would say, I sense anyway, a lot of underutilized resources that would get utilized if there were more of an aligned, profitable model. And so socially aligned, environmentally aligned, and efficient and profit-making. So I had that conversation with the leaders there, and they call themselves stewards, they call themselves trustees. So it's all conscious language, but fundamentally, right now they have to make some big decisions. And I'm hopeful that that the new model will be one in which people thrive and innovation is supported. And actually a higher level of consciousness can come through because there's more creativity. And whenever creativity is accessed, it's like the ground of being and spirit can show up more fully, and there's more consciousness. So I see that the future is bright for Findhorn. And I see that there are plenty of changes that need to be made in the next year. But then when I stepped back after having this really rich experience, it was quite unexpected. I went there to relax and meet with some friends, and it turned into essentially a big week of strategic conversations. But now I'm grateful because I see, well, this is happening everywhere. It's time for maybe radical reinvention of our systems. And what I learned, so these are some of the principles by...
Just before you go to the, I'm interested in the specific decoding that you can offer to principles, specifically about Findhorn. So how many people live inside the ecology itself, and what's the age range? I'm curious.
Well, I would say about 500, maybe a bit more in the community. And there are around 100 co-workers in the foundation. And people come and go, and there's quite a range of ages. I would say the people who live in the community seem to me to skew a bit older. It's people who have been around a while. And during more robust times, because they have no programs running right now, but when they have programs running, they have young people, older people, all kinds of people from all over the world. But right now it's much quieter.
Well, that's one of the curious inquiries. Are they able to bring in second, third, fourth generation of people? And you're describing that through the programs they are able, and that's an important measure in terms of whether something is able to update itself or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely. And there are all kinds of questions. How has the system evolved over the generations? Because it doesn't feel like it did in the 1960s, and some people wish it were more like the 1960s, and some people feel it needs to be something very new now that is more 21st century in vibe. So those conversations are happening, and there is a sense I have that this is a time for renewal, and it's not just about people with gray hair holding on to the past. Like that, to some extent, is what needs to be released, but there's enough new energy that it can be released gracefully.
And the challenge in a, as we know, in every system, can the system update itself and find a way to honor and uphold certain core permanent lines that were part of its initial arising and constitution, such that there is an evolutionary trace of the endeavor, but one that's inclusive of its past rather than dismissive of its past. And these are natural impulses. We see these with spiritual communities, we see these with companies that are looking to regenerate and renew themselves, and there is this two-vectored direction, going back to our roots to discover who we were when we started, and also going to discover what are the new fruits that we are about to bring to the world, and allowing those energies to merge in a new emergence rather than to conflict into the new time.
Right, and I did see that happen, in fact. So people who were present in the very early days of Findhorn are offering their wisdom now. And one experiment was to see whether that wisdom could harmonize with the new impulse and some of the new ideas that are emerging. And I was on a call where exactly that happened. So it's not the case that people who were there before just need to stop holding on to what was. Actually, there is this synthesis of the best and the best.
I've studied the part of the struggle and sometimes the pathologies we are discussing in many places around the world, all the way back to Israel, and why were there similar struggles with the kibbutz movement, the kibbutzim, and similarly with spiritual movements and with somewhat differently, but at the same time quite similar in companies and organizations. And one of the ways to describe that is people that were the core arising of something, they hold that with intensity of devotion that can be very hard sometimes for next generations to appreciate. And there is a sense of cleaving to what they believe was the purity of the initial idea. And so they hold to that, in the language I will use here, that gold core. And you have the new arising, you're going to use this term, silver emergent natures of a new generation that are looking to become explorative and entrepreneurial into new expressions. And there is an inherent conflict unless they are able to all develop mutual reciprocity of appreciation of the different functions they actually bring inside the evolutionary process, because they have distinct functions. And the way to facilitate this emergence begins with deep appreciation and acknowledgement and honoring and recognition of those different functions, and one that's prepared to embrace the human story and the humanity element on every side of that complex picture.
Yes, yeah, appreciation is so foundational. And when there is respect, yeah, it's amazing how much can actually shift when people feel seen and heard. And so I've been practicing appreciative inquiry and other appreciative approaches, like really start with what we love and build on a foundation of what we love. And in the case of Findhorn, there's much that is beloved that will need to be released. So for instance, some of the older structures, the bungalows, the original bungalows, they're now moldy and they weren't really built to last. They weren't this solid beam architecture that I was seeing in my meditation. And so the community is going through a process of, in some ways, consciously grieving. And that is healthy, I feel.
You were about to share some of the key learnings and how you codified those insights. So please.
Yes. So, well, one key word is alignment. And I've been practicing in terms of the, here we go, in terms of the intuitive listening for what is trying to happen. I've been practicing gauging, calibrating the alignment of an idea. So in the Findhorn case study, which we have before us, the three founding principles are every bit as applicable today: inner listening, co-creating with the intelligence of nature, and work as love in action. So those continue to be very resonant and very aligned. But then the question that comes to me is, in service to what? So what is it that the community can bring forward now at this time in history or herstory? And so what came to me was, well, we may need a fourth principle, because those three don't quite capture the why. It's really more the how and the what that I feel in the original principles, which is great. When you're manifesting, what are you manifesting? How are you going to do it? Okay, now we need a big why. And what came to me in a kind of intuitive flash is embodying the new humanity. So to embody the new humanity, we need to practice these principles. We need to listen and co-create with nature and other people, horizontally and vertically, with spirit even, and especially. And then to see that everything we're doing is an offering of love and love in action. So Findhorn has a unique opportunity, I would say, because of their longstanding practices to at least take a stand for embodying the new humanity. There's no single group on the planet that can say, like, we're it and we're fully it, and look at us and follow our example. We're learning together. And so I see there's a big opportunity to align all the individuals who feel a call with this fourth principle. Or maybe this is not a principle as much as it is an intersection of all the others. So that's been the number one word. And I found that when there is alignment, there is power. Somehow, the field, you could say the field of consciousness of life, does the heavy lifting when we come into alignment. It's like being, I'll use an example of an Aikido master, which I'm not, but standing in the center. And then all this energy is coming at you and swirling around you. And with just small movements, you can redirect big energies. And what I love about Aikido is it's the loving protection of the so-called attacker. So it's bringing that love into the center as well. And so that's another principle, that love is foundational. In fact, Eileen Caddy, I think it was, one of the founders of Findhorn, was asked later in her life, well, what is it about this place? What is it that's so special? And she says, it is love. It is love. It is love. So if we have alignment and we have love, we're off and running. It's also helpful to have intelligence and experience and professionals who can fulfill their function very efficiently and effectively, which has been a challenge in the eco-village setting, where everybody is honored and everyone is in some sense equal, and there are pros and cons to that. But you reach a point, which they're at now, where big changes are necessary, and you need the person with professional financial skills, and you need the person who can make the management consulting type decisions, and we need that now. So
Yeah.
those are the principles.
Yeah, beautiful. So 3 thoughts. First, about this word we discussed in the past, love. You and I really need to have a deep conversation about qualifying and codifying this word, so we open the range of its potential for our sake and for everybody that's interested in that inquiry. So that's thought number 1. Thought number 2 about alignment, very similar to the way you describe the Aikido master. In a similar way, in the Feldenkrais method, they do talk about alignment when there is functional organization that's optimal, that enables the transmission of force. So it completely aligns with what you're describing there, because when there is alignment, there isn't what is called parasitic work. Parasitic work means we are using energy, we're using force to produce no additional impact or no additional throughput, but rather wasted effort. And thirdly, about the significance of what you're describing in the bigger context. There are many endeavors that were launched around the 60s of the 20th century that in many ways embodied at the time the cutting edge of aspirational human development. And what you're describing is that there is a possibility, there is a way for those that are prepared to re-engage with the cutting edge of possibility today and update themselves. That is very important. I would ground the importance and the appreciation of this in the universal logic of the evolutionary process. And the part of the universal logic in evolution is that for as long as it is feasible and doable, this is a universe that's interested to harvest the experience of what has worked well and use it as a foundation, as a platform to whatever needs to happen next in the evolutionary cycle, in the evolutionary process. And the reason I'm proposing the awareness around this is because it defies the Maoist principle, the Maoist approach. The Maoist approach was, we will destroy the past of China to welcome a new future. There are, by the way, other theologies that I will not mention right here, right now, in all streams of world religions, where there is an envisioning of a future based on a destruction of the here and now. This is the autosuggestive idea that the world first must be destroyed, and there will be those who will be claimed into the new kingdom of God, rather than no, this is an experiment inside the creational process. So much has occurred here in terms of the richness of the biodiversity of life in all the natural worlds, and then all that has occurred in terms of the sapient species. And to the degree that we can, unless we completely ruin this possibility, this universe is still interested to kindly embrace us into its future, if we allow that evolutionary process to occur. So wherever you find a way to help endeavors that represented an important frontier in the 60s, and by the way, that extends to all other endeavors, ancient endeavors, ethnic groups, cultural groups, tribals. Essentially, the more we are able to bring forward a way of inclusion that's constructive, not one that's holding back, but one that enables the process of evolution, we strengthen what is arising now, because we're building it on a multi-layered, all the various sediments of support that the overlays, the layers of support that would make for a more resilient, more robust future. So I believe what you're describing there is an important service you were called to respond to, per the situation, but even more so because anywhere, anytime there is an endeavor that was able to renew itself, in some way it makes a transmission that such renewal is possible. And I've certainly seen up close and personal the struggle of the kibbutz movement in Israel. I've seen this with spiritual movements. The possibility of a system to renew itself is huge, and when it does, it transmits so much hope and so much possibility to every other system, even if those will not consciously be aware of it, because it builds the permission for renewal.
Absolutely. And I had the experience, so I now have the embodied experience of watching an acceleration occur. So as soon as we placed this crystal of clarity in the center, maybe a seed crystal, I watched people quickly come into alignment with that clarity. And I intuitively gauged upon my arrival at Findhorn that it would be about 6 months before there was a real sense of the new direction. By the time I left, I was calibrating that it would be about 6 weeks. And then that synchronized with some upcoming major meetings and steps that the community would be taking. So I feel that we can do this, not just at Findhorn, but anywhere, and we're learning how. And the more we actually have the lived experience individually and increasingly at the community level and then beyond, the more there'll be a phase change within society as a whole, or societies. And I actually feel intuitively that even with all the apparent chaos in the United States, that come November or December of this year, not necessarily linked to the election, just by the end of this year, we'll see enough evidence of the beautiful new beginnings and green shoots that ordinary perception will be able to see that there's a new pattern that is now here, and also in the UK. Whereas in countries that I would say are more more functional or maybe less disrupted is a friendly way to say it, like Australia and New Zealand. And New Zealand's already far ahead in certain respects, but I get that that the new pattern will show up first in places where there's more disruption. So I'm really anticipating great things from the USA and the UK where I am now, and everywhere, but at different points in time. So different societies are going to light up in the mandala at different points, and and they're going to bring different gifts as well. It's going to be very interesting to see this new whole picture emerge.
So it occurs to me that this may be a point to overlay and share some of my recent experiences.
Great.
Particularly two large events that I led over the last, since we've spoken last, over the last couple of weeks. Because in the new pattern that you are describing and that you are sensing that's emerging, there are many functional roles and capacities and capabilities that are going to be called forth. And such as the one you stepped into, which you would perhaps describe as an intuitive Sherpa translator of what is emergent in the system, such that you can then offer back language and tools to facilitate that emergence. How about that as a description of what you were doing?
I'm going to transcribe that and use it because it's spot on. That's exactly what I was doing.